This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Nick Schrock on the show. He is the founder of Dagster, and we're going to talk about Dagster. We're talking about how that got started and about leadership and data in general. Anyway, with all that being said, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, John.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today, and what is it that you do over at Dagster?
Yeah, so let's see, where to start. I graduated from the University of Michigan in 2003, which makes me quite old at this point. And then I kind of meandered about, I would say, for a good 6 years. I did a year at Microsoft. I actually did a year at London School of Economics. I thought I might not do software anymore. Came back, worked at a healthcare startup, actually tried to start something, but it was very nascent. And then in 2009, joined Facebook. And that's really what I'll say, where I'll say I really cut my teeth in terms of engineering at scale. While I was there, I founded a team called Product Infrastructure, and our mission was to make our application developers, our internal application developers, the people who built the website, built the mobile app, etc., more efficient and productive. So that took the form of working on internal frameworks that, you know, if you're an engineer at Facebook and you are adding features to the events product, I'm just picking a random one off the top of my head, you would be building on top of abstractions that me and that team had worked on. That team ended up evolving and growing, and we started producing open source projects that came out of the work. So the most famous of those is React, which I had nothing to do with, but you had Pete Hunt on the show 6 months ago, and he was a co-creator of React. And that's where I got to know Pete. And then I'm more affiliated with GraphQL, which I created, and I was the initial tech lead for, and then co-wrote the spec when we open sourced in 2015. So I really cut my teeth kind of building internal developer tools at Facebook, then, you know, open sourcing that stuff. And then I left in 2017, figuring out what to do next. I was looking around the Valley, talking to people outside the Valley. And that was interesting because one of the things I thought was super cool about the GraphQL experience and watching the React experience was how those technologies were not just exclusively Silicon Valley technologies earlier in their life cycle. Like, yes, we had users, based out of San Francisco, but we also, pretty early in the technology life cycle, Walmart were users, KLM was users, and I thought that was super cool. So I thought there was a huge opportunity in general to work on dev tools, and it's just very exciting to be able to create something new and have it penetrate all aspects of the economy and have such a broad horizontal market. And then I was talking to all these companies, this notion of data and ML, machine learning infrastructure, kept on coming up over and over. And I really dug into it and got hooked. I mean, kind of at a instinctive level, I'm drawn to developer experience dumpster fires, like a moth to a flame, because just the notion of engineers wasting their time and inefficient workflows with substandard tools or abstraction that don't make sense kind of almost makes me angry and very frustrated by proxy for them. Because like the choice of the wrong tool or having like slow feedback cycles can like be the difference between an engineer getting at home at night to talk to their family or not. Like, I think this stuff's really important on a personal level. And then it also translates to the systems that get built, of course. And then on the data front in particular, I was almost scandalized by the state of data ML engineering, especially given the fact that, these data platforms that companies that produce the data assets, that drive dashboards, that drive machine learning models, all this stuff, they're kind of, in some ways, you can think about the basis of nearly all decision-making in modern society, right? Business leaders decide things based on charts, or at least informed by it. And then machine learning models make automated decisions that affect our lives, right? Who gets mortgages or not, how we price healthcare products, what news we see, what news we don't see. And the fact that it was kind of fundamentally like a poorly engineered ecosystem was fundamentally bothered me, I guess. I think that we all have this modern sense in modern society that everything's out of control and there's tons of chaos, and we are playing with forces that we fundamentally do not understand and cannot control. And I think this plays a part in that. It might sound kind of highfalutin. And so, and I think the way to manage complexity in software is with software engineering processes and abstractions that align with them. So super motivating to work on that. So I kind of started prototyping in 2018, talking to lots of people, raised a small seed round led by some ex-Facebook folks. And then the company really started taking off in 2019, hired our first employee, launched the project in 2019, ended up raising a Series A from Index Ventures, and then we were off to the races. So fast forward, now we have a team of around 50. We have tons of customers, all the way from startups, hundreds of startups, to and smaller companies, all the way to the Fortune 100, and raised our Series B first quarter of this year. And, things are, we have a lot of momentum, and it's very exciting.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about like how you feel like you guys are playing a role in, kind of organizing that data so that, algorithms are, helping humanity in a way, because it feels like you're passionate about making sure that developers have a good life, that they're not, using the wrong tools and working long hours, which I'm very passionate about that too, because I got into, when I was a developer, it was very much expected that you would work late, and even that as a manager too. And then I realized that at one point, I think it was because I read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Workweek, which I imagine a lot of people have read at one point or another. And, I was like, he's right. Yeah, if I do leave at 5, I still find a way to get everything done. I don't have to stay as long as I optimize and prioritize my time properly. And it's one of those things that was happening to me, subconsciously. I've just made a point to I'm going to check out at this time. And yeah, I'll have my phone on me. Yes, but I'm not going to be checking emails during dinner. I'm going to, wait till my kids go to bed and then catch up on things if I need to. But, how is it that you guys are playing a role in that?
Yeah, so I guess I don't come at it from like the 4-hour work week Tim Ferriss point of view, because in software engineering, the work is never done, really. I mean, like, in some ways it is, some ways it isn't. Depends on how you frame your work. So when I said earlier, like, yes, the right tools can be the difference between you getting home to your family or not, like, sometimes that's true. But also, productivity is, there's 2 dimensions in software. One is like, there's a well-defined task and you get it done in a short period of time. Then there's the notion of productivity, meaning like raising the level of abstraction and being able to get things out of your head that don't need to be there, so you can think about higher level things and think about compounding infrastructure. And to me, that's about like getting in flow state and really thinking about software engineering from the creative discipline perspective. Yeah. And I don't think it's I don't think burnout, for example, is a function of the number of hours that you're working. I think it's a function of like, does your work motivate you? Does it feel like it's actually having impact? Because some of the most like sustainable times in my career, it felt like, sustainable might be the wrong term, but exhilarating, I would say, that kept me motivated, were times where I was like in flow state with the team, all the creative juices were flowing. There was massive amounts of camaraderie, and we were like working from dusk till dawn, but it was fun, right? And some of the most, like, I think when I've gotten burned out in my career is often where like it appeared I was working the least, where, I wasn't motivated, I wasn't aligned with the mission of the team, or something was going on. And actually there's kind of a degree of presenteeism or presentism where you're just kind of like showing up and doing the rounds and whatnot.
Engagement kind of.
Yeah. So I guess like so this answer is kind of going far afield, but to me, like if you have the right tools, the right developer workflow, it actually makes work much more, not just more productive and more sustainable. And it's kind of like a win-win-win in all dimensions. You want to work more because it's more fun and you like feel like you're in flow state. And per hour you're working, you're also getting more and more stuff done. And on a qualitative basis, you're kind of like thinking bigger because you're not stuck in the churn and toiling away on stupid problems. You can kind of think bigger. So yeah, there's a bunch of, I didn't organize my thoughts particularly well there, but I think that I really think that tools are not just about making things more efficient, but making fundamentally new things possible by freeing the engineer from having to work on toil that's beneath them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Because I know whenever you have to do, I guess I do want to say a lot of lower level things, things that don't require, much thought, just more like repetitive tasks. You get out of that flow state. You start to hate work, start to hate your life, start to realize that this sucks. But when you are creating something, you have this creative thought, this type of, solving problems, coming up with a new solution to something, you get excited and you feel good about it. It's like that dopamine kicks off in your brain that you've checked something off your list, you've done something, you're able to be more productive, and then you want to do more. It gives you that encouragement. And I think that comes in. It gives you purpose too, right? Because you're not doing something that you feel like anybody could do, or that you could maybe even write something to do for you. You're doing something that requires, a certain level of expertise.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. How is it that you see Dagster, playing into all these? You mentioned machine learning, and a lot of people use AI. And, I don't know. For me, I always thought of AI as being more like sentient, and machine learning being like, what is AI today? I don't know what your thoughts on it, but how do you see guys playing into all that's going on with AI right now?
So I consider AI to be advanced machine learning, insofar as you are writing software that ingests data and then produces an artifact, a model that can make decisions and itself is kind of a computer program, right? It's all connected because fundamentally, when you hear about LLMs now, right? There's like kind of this class of so-called foundation models, which are being trained on kind of like full corpus of the internet, right? And that provides it, someone explained it to me in terms of like almost these models. It's kind of like, you think about it as like developing the stages of life of a child, right? Where like these initial foundation models provide like a base set of capabilities that are maybe like, what a toddler knows or what a kindergarten knows. But then if you want to refine the model and target it towards more specific use cases, because like everything depends on context, you usually need to start feeding it some sort of proprietary data or data that has been recontextualized somehow. And that fundamentally is going to be data pipelining. So the building a effectively assembly line, the kind of the more fancy term here is a DAG, a directed acyclic graph. But you think of it as like a very complicated assembly line in a factory that takes data, processes it in a regularized way, and produces reliable artifacts. And then you want to be able to do that on an ongoing basis in a repeatable fashion. So I guess the way that we're connected to all of this is that a ton of the work to make analytics happen, to make ML happen, and to make AI happen is all this fundamental act of data pipelining. And that's building a directed acyclic graph of functions which consume and produce data assets. That's the way we think about it. So we really think that what we're working on is a core primitive that applies across like a ton of different domains.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing I wanted to talk to you about when I heard you come on the show, which I was super excited about, is to you founded this company, you kind of built it up to a point, and then you sort of decided that you wanted to take a little bit deeper role into the technology side of it. At least that's what my perception is from this, because you went from kind of running the thing to hiring someone to kind of do some of the business aspects and focusing more on technology. What helped you make that decision?
So so Pete, for the context for the audience, I founded the company in 2018. It was a CEO until October, November, I forget the exact month, but last year until October 2022, say. And I had hired Pete to be the head of engineering in February of that year. And I had known him for like a decade. I had worked with him. I had, collaborated with him on projects outside of work. So we were, very highly aligned on many things and aligned values. And he had actually founded a company, scaled it to 5 million ARR, annual recurring revenue, and sold it to Twitter. And I was able to convince him to come on as head of engineering. And he was always going to have a more expansive role than that, given his background and experience. And, as he came on board, one, I felt personally very stretched. Being solo founder, CEO is a very lonely job. And I had 2 young kids, which is definitely kind of playing on hard mode. And I had to be building an organization, and that meant I could only give so much attention to actually focusing on the product and the technology and the evangelizing of it, which are kind of like my sweet spots. And then it became clear as Pete would just ask me questions. Oh, what are we doing about this? And then I would increasingly ask him advice about our go-to-market strategies and marketing. And he was just a very effective operator of the company. And to me, it kind of became obvious over that time that, listen, Pete should be doing all these activities, and I should be focused on what my superpowers are. And the needs of the company had changed as it had scaled. So it made a lot of sense to have Pete run sales, run marketing, and all that sort of stuff. And given our backgrounds and aligned values, I was very comfortable. And the fact that he'd been investor facing before and done a bunch of recruiting, it just made a lot of sense for the division of responsibilities to be that. I thought, and I think it's worked out very well. The transition's been very smooth, and the trajectory of the company is accelerated as a result.
Well, I think it's a really good decision. It's also kind of a humble decision to make, because a lot of times when you found something, that's your baby, right? You got to own that thing, and it's really hard to kind of step back and give responsibility to others and delegate some of that responsibility away. Was that a tough decision at all? Did you struggle with it, or were you just like, because it's Pete and you know him so well, it was just an easy move?
It made it dramatically easier because of the unique history with Pete. I probably would not have done it if that context weren't there.
Yeah.
And then, even though I'm no longer CEO, I still have a little pull around here. And so I'm highly involved in our fundraising narratives, in recruiting, and shaping the culture and whatnot. And, a very good relationship with Pete and the board. So, it felt like, what's the right analogy here? It was less around giving up the baby than bringing on another co-parent.
Gotcha.
Which is a much different kind of psychological feeling.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes perfect sense. And it's, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because, being in the tech world for a long time and knowing, how, Pete's experience with React and your experience with the GraphQL and how you've kind of done these things before, really, when you put the two of you guys together, it makes for a really powerful team, for building up what you guys are working on now,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've highly aligned values and complementary skill sets too. So that also works out well.
Yeah, I imagine it also helps with investors and recruiting. If you want to recruit good talent, having both of you guys there is running the show.
Totally.
Yeah. So where do you see you guys going in the future? What's the future for Dagster?
So, I think the generic answer is kind of building on the success and momentum that we have.
Right.
In terms of the product, I think that what I'm really excited about is that right now we are defined as within this category of orchestration. And so we have peer technologies we compete against in our category. Airflow is the dominant incumbent. There are other technologies like Prefect, Flight, dbt Cloud to some degree. And orchestration is kind of narrowly defined, I would say, which is this scheduling and ordering of computations in production. And that is kind of where we started, but we have a much more expansive vision for where Dagster sits in the ecosystem. We really view ourselves as more generally a control plane for companies' data platforms, where it's not just about orchestration. Like, we're the system of record for metadata. It's where you go to understand your lineage. It's where you go to schedule things. Yes, it's where you go to understand the data quality. It's actually very natural to have all this information in the synthesized manner in one platform. And I think we have work both on product as well as work in marketing and education to convince the marketplace that is correct. So there's a big future ahead of us, but it's also a lot of work. And that's pretty exciting. We see the success in our customer base. And I think one of the, proofs of that is that, we do these surveys where we ask people, what do you use Dagster for? Right. And maybe like 80% are ETL analytics, 60% for ML, 50% they describe themselves as production applications. The interesting about that is that this starts to add up to more than 100% pretty quickly, which means that multi-use case is the norm. So the notion of it being a cross-cutting control plane that spans different teams that historically haven't been well connected is already happening. And then once you're doing that, then it becomes this incredibly powerful leverage point where it's like, hey, we can all standardize in the same way to report data quality, right? And in the end, you have this living, breathing, schedulable asset graph where you can, it's literally a physical manifestation of your data platform. You can understand the whole organization. And that, I think, is super exciting. And we're effectively executing on that vision probably for the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, no, that sounds really exciting. And it's really, I'm sure, encouraging to see that people are using, this for multiple areas. They're not just using it for production. They're using it for, our ML. They're using it for lots of different things. You're able to kind of tap into those customers and probably build a lot more user stories of how they're going to be using this in the future. What is the roadmap for each one of those verticals and expanding that out?
Yeah, totally. No, we have plenty of work to do. When you build a tech, it's kind of the classic engineer problem. You build this tool and it's like very flexible and you can do all sorts of stuff with it, but you're at risk of diluting your message.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge, but the other thing is that we also have like a really broad customer base too, all the way from like, the Discords of the world, very sophisticated Silicon Valley, consumer facing startups, to Kraft Heights, right? Which is one of our biggest customers, which is a, huge, more legacy company. I shouldn't say legacy, but traditional company that does package consumer goods. But that's one of those, it's a universal need.
Yeah. As I said, it's one of those things you see that today, like even, traditional companies are tech companies, now, really. I mean, everything is tech driven, even though they may have a physical product that they're selling in storefronts, retail, they're still driven by technology. I had a boss at a former company that came from Lowe's, and, Lowe's is, extremely sophisticated when it comes to technology, being able to map out inside their stores. You take the app, as soon as you show up, it'll show you where the product is, what shelf, what bin, how to get to it really quickly. And it's all mapped out, and, you're taking traditional retail stores and turning them into these tech hubs. And I think that's
totally.
One of the things that's super important when you're building a product these days. You're not just focusing on Silicon Valley. You're focusing on a much larger customer base.
Yeah, and even companies that don't have an app or something still have massive technology needs in the back end, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're Lowe's customer and you never interact with the app, but you're navigating the store, like you are still participating in a software-driven process in terms of the way that they get their products to market and do inventory tracking and the internal operations of the company. Like the internal complexities of these large organizations is difficult to overstate.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you think about, just inventory. Just take that one small aspect. How do you know when to order more? How do you know what the trends are? How do you know, it's Christmas time. We're going to sell more, extension cords now, or whatever, and plan for that for the future to have all that just-in-time inventory put in place and purchasing done and shipping done. It's just mind-blowing to think about.
It is mind-blowing to think about.
And that's just one example. There's thousands of them. You look at media, maybe from TV industries. How do you know which commercials to do? What's your inventory? What's your rate per commercial per hour? And depending on if it's prime time or not prime time, you get all these, complex things that are out there today that you have to think about no matter what industry or vertical you're in.
Right.
So how is it that you guys build for that? How do you plan for that just data pipeline? I mean, you're building that, but how do you make it so flexible for any industry, any customer base?
So we define the problem that our customer, the kind of on the ground user,
right,
is a data engineer or a data platform engineer. Typically, they're the people who bring us in to the organization, and their job in life is to empower themselves and to empower others to build data pipelines and manage the data in an org. And there's typically an entire vast array of tools that does that. And there's no way that we can provide kind of a out-of-the-box solution for all of those different configurations in the world. Like the needs are too heterogeneous and complex. So we really, first of all, we believe that this is a software engineering problem and that it takes software engineers to solve it, or people with software engineering mindset.
Yes.
And so we provide a toolkit for people in order so that they can build their own internal data platform. And in order to do that, you need basic capabilities, like you need to be able to schedule compute, but you also want to be able to kind of understand what's going on and also integrate with all the different technologies that are at a company, both kind of more like a very out-of-the-box technology as well as like random bespoke stuff. So, we, in the end, are a productivity toolkit and a orchestrator for data engineers who are building pipelines and also platforms so that other people can build data pipelines on top of it.
So I know you have all these templates to help people get started. What's the I guess the benefit for doing this and having those templates in place, and how important is education for your customers?
Education is totally important, both for the customers that adopt, as well as them kind of onboarding their stakeholders, because the life of a data platform team is serving their partner teams. So, depending on how somewhere is organized, I think like kind of the ideal end state of a data platform is where you have a central team that manages the technology and internal platform, and then data practitioners embedded with every line of business within that org. And that means that their job in life of a data platform engineer is onboarding stakeholders external to their team and being a service org to them. And that means that, to get back to your original question, that education is massively important for both the engineers themselves, but also so we can provide materials to them. We really realized this. We created this course that we call Dagster University, which has been spectacularly successful, far more than I anticipated. Frankly, all total disclosure, I was actually fairly skeptical it was going to deliver value beyond our documentation. And I've never been so wrong and never been happy enough to be so wrong. I think it's important to allow teams to execute on things, even if, you as a founder might not align with your instincts, but that's a separate issue. So education is super important. And then, just like having templates and examples is very important so that people can somewhere to start with. It's just like, that's how I think most people, including myself, kind of think. And then you can look at an example and be like, then very quickly adapt it to your particular context rather than like reconstruct everything from scratch. When you view an example, there's just a ton of assumptions and knowledge that are implicitly communicated there, even if you never directly use that template or example.
Yeah. I think that's really cool that you guys are offering that education the way you are with Dagster University. I think that's one of the best ways to actually get a product in front of people and help them understand all that you can do with it, versus maybe the one use case that they were thinking about at the time. Where do you see, I guess, Dagster University growing into and going? Is there going to be more courses, more offerings, or totally in-person live events, maybe a conference?
Yeah, I think that in terms of Dagster University itself, it's definitely a platform.
Mm-hmm.
We love platforms here.
Yes, we do.
And where people are going to build modules, and then, we can specialize them for specific use cases. We can continue to go deeper. I think we just have scratched the surface of everything. And then also, I also want it to be a platform where people can just we have opinions about the way data engineering should work. Obviously we think they're the right opinions, but yes, it's about learning Dagster, but it's also about, we want to be a resource for people who want to learn about modern data engineering best practices, because it's not obvious, and we've learned a lot over the last years, and we think there's a ton of room to grow there in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Not just in terms of Dagster technology, but in terms of the discipline. We respect the discipline. It's one of our core values here. And so it's not just teaching about a particular technology. It's about the discipline of data engineering and data platform engineering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate having you on, Nick. If you don't mind, just tell the audience how they can connect with you online and learn more about what Dagster's doing.
Yeah, so in terms of me personally, I'm on Twitter, Schrockn, SCHROCKN is my handle, similar on LinkedIn. And then you can go to Dagster.io to learn about Dagster. We have a Slack community, which is very active. That's kind of where we interface with the community more. And then it's very easy to get started. Our open source, you can install right on pip, which is Python package manager. And then also we have a self-serve cloud product where you can permissionlessly get going. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'll link that too in the show notes at geekleader.com so people can click on it and go that way. Nick, again, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to, click on their links, and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.